What up, though? Welcome back to World Heavyweights Live, WorldSports.com. I'm your boy Easy Joe, my guy Spinmo Rax, Young Chris,
What up,
KG. Do we have our guy Dose of Dion?
Let me see. Yes, we do. Give me a second to put him on the 3 cam.
Legend.
The legend.
Yes, sir.
Dose of Dion. I want to get Dion on because he dropped a great video yesterday. I've been moving all week, and I caught a break, and I watched it, and it was his top 5 needs for the Detroit Lions position-wise. I'm off my game today. This game is majorly distracting me. Dion, thank you for joining the show. I wanted to ask you specifically because you said you had Sam linebacker in there, and I guess I wanted to get an explanation on that and what type of guys you're looking at.
Right. Hey, well, first off, man, I'm a little thrown off too. I don't know if that was an analogy that Spinmo Rax used. I've never heard that before, so I was gonna let that slide. But as soon as I joined, I was like, all right, I haven't heard that one. I might have to look that one up. Maybe that's not something to talk about on the show. I don't know. Yeah, I ain't never heard that before. So I was like, all right, I don't know where to go with that. No, man. Hey, first off, appreciate you checking out the video. I'll say this, man. That was a weird one for me because where I ended up putting on the list, I felt like in a way it was maybe a little bit high. Like maybe I shouldn't have put that at 3. Maybe I should have dropped that thing to 4. But and the biggest reason, honestly, for that is just because of the amount of snap usage. Like, it's not one of those spots, especially in today's NFL, where that's consistently going to be on the field. Like, it's easy to say, oh, an outside corner, he's going to be on the field all the time. Like, there's certain positions that are always going to be out there. Saying a Sam linebacker in the top 3, that dude's not going to be out there all the time. And that's just because of personnel groupings that the offense is going to use. However, my main reasoning for putting that position was I try to explain a little bit in the sense of I think we could have the answers here. James Houston being a major piece of that, assuming he comes back an exclusive rights free agent. Then also Derek Barnes started to kind of mix into that role a little bit. I didn't think Jack Campbell did well there at all at the beginning of the season. So we could have the answers potentially on the roster. And I think that it wouldn't shock me if the Lions looked at that and said, look, Barnes won last year, on his deal. He'll get more snaps at that spot. We'll let him try to earn that. And then James Houston, we get him back healthy. We'll let those guys kind of rotate in that role. He'll be still our kind of pass rush piece. And then we can decide if we want to bring anybody back before adding something on top of that. We know they like to build through the draft. But for me, I just looked at really from the beginning of the year when Campbell was playing it, I didn't think it was consistent. But also on top of not just pass rush, because I feel like James Houston could give me that. I know James Houston give me pass rush, even though it wasn't as good as his first year. But I look at that position to just say from run defense, pass coverage, when those guys are on the field, I think that's a position right now that just hasn't shown me enough between the players that have been out there where I think that you can really upgrade and it wouldn't maybe take a significant addition to do it. I think that's one of those spots that you're not going to see it every snap. But, you talk about 300 snaps in a season, and then if he is a big-time pass rusher on pass rush situations as well, like I just think from an FBI standpoint, we can improve there and just get more consistency, especially on early downs.
I agree. And we saw Jalen Reeves-Maybin when he stepped in the game. He looked pretty damn good playing that role. I mean, obviously he's not going to be your full-time guy. I have a feeling they're going to re-sign him, but you want to keep him for how great he is in special teams. But when you do look at this draft, how do you think it's going to break down with that first pick, Dion? Because every time I do it, I keep looking at it. I keep finding myself taking interior offensive line in that first round just because I just think that's what – I don't think they're going to re-sign Jonah. I do think they'll bring back Graham, and obviously Frank said he's staying. But I think you need to get that guy that can start day one at left guard and then possibly fill in for Frank if he decides to hang it up in the next year or so.
Yeah, I don't hate that at all. I think, man, I'm still so open on that spot because one side of me is saying, okay, don't expect that guy to be a starter. Now, if you're doing it on the interior offense line, expect him to be a starter because where they're getting taken at the end of the first round, that guy should be a starter. But for a lot of other positions, it's like, okay, if I took an edge defender, will he start? Maybe not, but can he play a role there? Probably. He could be a role piece, rotated and out. Like that's kind of the range you're getting to if they don't move up and he gets to number 29. So part of me is kind of on the fence because I'm like, even if it's a cornerback, depending on what cornerback it is he you have to play him day one, or could he maybe just not be ready yet, depending on the certain cornerback that you go get? So I'm really open between a lot of things right now. I mean, interior defensive line, I haven't been blown away with a ton of guys that really fit for me at that spot, but I actually love your interior offensive line take. If Jonah doesn't come back, I think there's a lot of dudes that, whether they play guard now, maybe they played center, even tackles that could slide inside. I think there's so many flexible players that could fall in that range in this draft. I would love to add to that, and I think for us, what makes the guard position so darn valuable, and speaking of the list that Easy brought up, I had that at 2, it makes it so valuable to me just because of the flexibility that they add to this offense. It's you can't look at this team and say we match up well because, man, they love to run it this way. It's now you have to deal with everything because they'll bring everything to the table. So I love the interior offensive line talk, and I'm pretty much I'm pretty much open to anything, honestly, at that spot. It just depends on if I'm expecting to get immediate starter or not. And for a lot of positions, I still kind of want to hit it in free agency, like for a cornerback, for example, just in case that he's not completely ready right away if I sit at 29.
Yeah, the one I heard, and I'm not talking about names specifically, but our guy Scott Bischoff talked about taking a tackle. It's actually Penei Sewell's cousin, an example that he used. I watched the tape, and I was not a fan of it, though, but the guy over in BYU. But he's talking about grab a tackle, they can play guard for you, and then also be a possible solution for Taylor Decker down the road if he decides to move on, with his career, because we know Taylor's getting up there, and hopefully he gets a Super Bowl ring, and maybe comfortable enough to walk away. Another question I wanted to ask, have you been able to look at any of the free agents, or you've been so busy trying to catch up on the draft? Because I noticed Lions content creators we're so much further with the draft than we are used to being. Because we used to scouting that stuff almost mid-season. This time we didn't get to jump on it until the beginning of mid-January. But have you been able to take a look at any free agents? Anybody that piques your eye?
Yeah, I mean, do you mean at a specific position, or are you just saying in general?
I mean, all of the above, really. Yeah, any names or positions.
Yeah, for me, I think one of the spots that we could really hit, and originally coming in, I was like, yo, this would be the great opportunity to go get that veteran edge rusher. If you're going to go get that piece where it's we're just speaking about a Sam Becker, if you're going to go get a piece that he's an elite premier pass rusher, not going to play all the snaps, but this would be a perfect time to do it. So first name, I was like, oh, Jadeveon Clowney. That makes perfect sense. Then I watched him. I was like, okay, I like it. I don't love it, though. So I think something like that on paper could work as long as it's the right piece. But I'll be honest with you, man, two things that I think work perfectly. Number one, interior defensive lineman, I think, would be an awesome position to hit in free agency. And I have a couple of names for that. I think there's a wide radius you can hit. I mean, you got the expensive guys at the top. You have potentially, Reader hitting free agency. You have the Chris Jones. You have Justin Madubuike. But then you could also go down. You're I got the veterans too, the Shelby Harris. Then you got kind of middle. And for me, man, I still kind of sit on the ledge of, Grover Stewart intrigues me so much this offseason because I just wonder with the suspension where his kind of price tag goes. And I don't want to, part of me doesn't want to go too long and be like, yo, give him a 4-year deal because one, Brad Holmes doesn't typically do that. And then two, I'm like, well, Broderick Martin could be the answer, and they're hoping that he's the answer eventually. But if I added a kind of a veteran piece that I just knew could hold it down, he was going to be great against the run, maybe even sprinkle a little pass rush to add with Aleem, and then I still give Broderick time to kind of come along. That's one of those positions where I think as good as the Lions were against the run, they really could just improve personnel-wise there, and I think free agency would be a great spot to do it because I don't want to necessarily draft someone directly on top of Broderick Martin for that exact same role. But I also think in saying that you can go a lot of different ways. You could go the Fletcher Cox route in free agency. Maybe you can pry him from Philly. I've heard some quotes and I'm like, that could be interesting. You can go a lot of different ways on the interior because Aleem's going to move around based on who you put with him. So I love that position, and I'm going to stay on it, man. Andrew Van Ginkel, to me, if the Lions don't address, kind of that outside linebacker type position, kind of those tweener players. I've been going through a lot of those guys today. Andrew Van Ginkel to me is just such a super interesting addition because he just looks like a Lion when I watch him. To me, I don't know. Again, I don't know if we're going to want to put someone on top of Barnes and James Houston, but when you talk about coverage, run defense, pass rush, to me, he's not elite as a pass rusher, right? I think James has a higher ceiling, but he does everything else so darn well. Then he can play off ball too, so you never are going to run out of flexibility. I don't think his price tag gets super high because he's not a top tier pass rushers that get paid $20 million a year. Yeah. Someone like that intrigues me so much because I think he fits so well.
Yeah, I think in limited time that Miami, I'm looking right now, it's still at 6 sacks. And I remember he didn't really get time until Jaden Phillips went down. So it's that's actually really impressive. And I do think he plays a linebacker spot well. We're talking about dropping into coverage. But that'd be honestly, he is a Dan Campbell guy. He's a guy who's never had it his entire career. He had to get it out the mud, and he proved that when he finally got PT with Miami. That would be huge. Interception, 4 touchdowns, on Hard Knocks, wasn't it?
Yeah. Picked off a screen. Yeah. Picked off the screen, man. It was nasty.
Every time I look at these interior defensive and free agents, DJ Reader is the one that just stands out to me because I feel like he fits so well. You could put him in between Aleem and Hutch. Commands a double team. I think his market's going to be down a little bit because of the injury that he went through. And I don't know. I feel like that would be a perfect fit if he could stay healthy and you could put him there in between those guys. Just that mammoth dude in the middle.
If you had to pick one or the other, who are you taking?
Between DJ Reader and Grover Stewart? Is that what you're asking me?
And Van Ginkel, too.
Oh,
crazy name to say out
dang.
loud.
I'm going deep.
I feel like I'm not.
Sounds like a slur.
Yeah.
You just think what Andrew Van go with the first name.
That motherfucking Van Ginkel over there.
Goddamn Van Ginkel.
That's why it's great, though. We have to have dudes that are names that okay, I don't know about that one. We always have weird names. We're running out of them. We got to start to get those back to the mix.
It's a great point.
Look, man.
Good point.
if the price tag was the same, I would say absolutely DJ Reader, because I think what Spenmo Rax is saying, he's speaking facts here to me, is that when you also look at where DJ Reader is coming from schematically, like just looking at when he was at Cincinnati, it was like, oh, this is like so similar to what we're trying to do here. And he's been so darn good, so consistent. And it's like, yeah, if I put that in there with the Aleem, like in a way it may kind of overlap Broderick. But man, I mean, let's let him rotate. Like if Broderick picks it up, let him rotate. But that would be just it'd just be a seamless fit to me to just plug that guy in. But I think based on the price tag, I think Van Ginkel will come at a really nice bargain. So I would actually lean Van Ginkel just based on the price tag. But if you're telling me that it's like somewhat similar, oh, definitely DJ Reader. Absolutely.
I think you made a great point too in the video yesterday. Again, make sure you guys check that out if you haven't already. But it's those Dion's top 5 like positions of need for the Detroit Lions. But when you brought up how great the Detroit Lions run defense has been like the past like year and a half, it's very, very true. But when you get to the red zone, what would you say it was ranked like 30th or 31st? Yeah, 30th. And I think it's because we don't have those big body guys when it comes down to like stopping the run like on the first line. It is more scheme. It is more that 4-2. Everyone's just kind of like sliding down and attacking. I think that's huge, man.
Yeah, I mean, and this is I didn't even bring it up, but I thought about this after I was making it. Is I can remember the talk of how much we discussed like defensive backs play a role in the run defense too. Like when it was not doing well early, I think a year ago, like the discussion was like, all right, the defensive backs got to be part of it too. I mean, I remember Aaron Glenn bringing that up, and I think for us, what's made us so good is that every level's really good against the run. Like defensive backs gets involved, obviously schematically blitzing, the slants, all those things. But yeah, it's exactly to that point. Like if they know you're going to run the ball when you get to the 3-yard line, but you just can't stop it. Like at one point there, it's like, all right, do we just have the dudes in the interior? And we saw it. It's almost kind of like the reason I brought up the sandbag position in an interesting way, because Houston was more of an injury, so we kind of just rotated through dudes that could try to help us in different ways. But the interior defensive line, in a way, we kind of rotated through guys that weren't Aleem McNeil. Once Aleem McNeil got injured, it was just like, all right, who the heck can play? Because Levi, he looks better, but it's like he's not playing nearly enough. Let's bring in Alualu, right? We're just bringing in dudes left, right. Benito Jones didn't have a great season after last year, so that's just like one of those positions to me where we also don't really have a stable piece that we know of outside of Aleem McNeil. But yeah, I think it definitely shows up in those spots.
Man, I know you've been grinding that tape for the draft, man. I know you've been grinding it, and I know you got the positions that need down. Where do you see the talent in this draft pool coming from? Like, I guess like what position group do you think we should attack first to grab like the best of the best?
Yeah, no, that's. Yeah, it's a tough one for me because, like to me, like I said, I'm pretty open, but I do think that offensive line could hit really well at that spot. Now, it may not even be a need. I mean, we bring back both our guys. It's not even that kind of a need. But I think it's going to be really open at that spot. It's going to be a lot of names. Like Spenmo Rax brought this up first, but there's just like so many dudes that I feel like can move around, play different spots on the offensive line, and I love adding to that. I think cornerback also is going to have some really interesting. I think cornerback's kind of deep this year. I mean, I don't know what the thought is like around the world, but just from what I've seen, I really like a lot of cornerbacks into what seems like people are thinking late rounds. I like a lot of dudes there. So that's one of those spots where I'm like, part of me is like, I wouldn't be mad if we hit free agency, did another 1-year type of deal with a guy, and we're like, hey, if he's healthy, he can start. And then on the flip side, it's like, let's actually draft someone. Let's get someone in the building because we haven't really done that at corner, even if it's not the top pick in the draft. And then again, I think, dude, there's some pass rushers, man. I think there's like really nice pass rushers. They all feel like they have different skill sets for that number 29 pick. It's just kind of like, what am I looking for? Do I want like the inside outside flexibility like a Robinson, right? Do I want more of kind of like, man, that Ben's insane with a Chop Robinson? Like, I think there's so many different types of fits when you look at that spot where the Lions could kind of hit whatever style that they're looking for at that spot. They want to go that direction. To me right now, it feels between offensive line and edge is where I feel like it's kind of like leaning heavy for me right now, just based on also where we're at. But I think cornerback's going to be really nice going into day 2.
That's perfect because we actually got KG in the sound booth today, and he wanted to ask you about the cornerback position.
Hey, what up, Dion? Fan of the content, bro. But if you're Brad Holmes, how would you attack the corner position? Because we know we need a 1, but I don't necessarily think you need a star or a shutdown in that spot. I think you can go with maybe like a Stephon Gilmore and then draft a guy and develop from there. But if you're Brad Holmes, how are you attacking this cornerback position this year?
Yeah, no, I mean, I love that because to me, like, that's the number 1 need. And I love how you brought that up because when I say that, it's like, people may think that has to be the first round pick or that has to be the biggest free agent signing, but I think to what you just said is perfect. And maybe that it could be the Stephon Gilmore because he feels like he'd be a 1-year deal, and I'm a huge fan of Gilmore. I don't think he looked great this last year, but I'm a big fan of the guy. But I like that approach. Like, I think that's a strong approach to take again. Heck, even if it was an Emmanuel Mosley, just based on what I've seen in the past from Mosley, I know he was hurt. They may just be like, yo, just stay away from that, go a different direction. I'm okay with that. But I liked what he did before he got here. So something like that to me would make sense. And then, like I said, because I feel like cornerback has some really intriguing pieces in the middle rounds, it could work out really well. The flip side of that, however, is even if I signed a cornerback, because I think in a way you kind of have to, because I think the cornerback's position is one of those spots where if you told me in a world where Lions brought every single cornerback that played for them this past year, you would still say this needs a massive improvement. The answers just don't seem to be here right now. You can't really bank on that. There's no one that's really developing to that kind of role. So even if you were to add someone in free agency and say it wasn't like a big-time deal, because I struggle to think the Lions will give out a big-time deal to a cornerback after paying Cam Sutton on a 3-year deal unless they were to move off of Sutton. But there would also be that side of me where it's like, hey, if you're sitting there at 29 and one of those cornerbacks that you really like does end up getting there, you just say, I'm still taking him at 29. Like, that's how I look. I thought we'd go cornerback last year. I'd still be open to taking at 29 as long as it's the right fit. I don't know where people are kind of feeling like these guys are going to fall, and I've tried to stay away from mock drafts the best that I can until I do one. But, like, guys like Cooper DeJean, for example, where I was like, I struggle with his anticipation. But, bro, that guy's got, like, all the traits he could be. If someone was like, that was just sitting at 29, dude, absolutely. I'm like, okay, yeah, I would just do it. I don't care who I sign. I'm just going to draft him anyway. So I guess that keeps, like, the best available option. But, yeah, I love that strategy. I would follow a similar strategy probably this offseason.
And speaking of strategy, you know, we've seen Brad Holmes do anything and everything in this short time in the first round. Trade it up, trade it down, take people who are high value, high draft value, take people who don't have the highest value when you look at a running back or a linebacker in the first round, normally frowned upon by GMs, but damn, it worked out. What do you see him more likely doing, not staying put, either trading up or trading down, if you were to do one in this year's first round?
Boy, that's a good question. Man, so I'm just trying to, because we don't have a fourth, we have 2/3. Like, I would say that I would say more likely to trade down. I would say more likely to trade down because of where I think our roster's at. Like, if I feel like we needed more immediate starters, I would say probably more likely to trade up, because I think if you wanted to make sure that you have a guy that can start your one, you would have to push it a little bit potentially, or maybe it hits, but there's a good chance you'd probably say, let's like move up a little bit. But I don't think there's a ton of glaring positions like that. Again, the guard position is a great example, just depending on how that falls for us specifically. But because I don't think there's a ton of positions that it's like you can argue the Lions don't have an answer on the roster, that I think it would be more likely that they'd move back, acquire more picks. And I would also, like, even to the last point about the cornerbacks, I'm not, like, closed-minded to the idea if Brad Holmes went out of nowhere, surprised us, and just went out and traded a pick for a current corner in the league. Like, something like that would not surprise me from Brad, because of the same reasoning of, like, hey, we're sitting at 29, right? If we don't hit this in free agency or we don't really like someone there, it wouldn't be the worst move to try to go trade for someone that's like, hey, they're not going to pay him anyway, let's just go get him. Because then it's still kind of the one-year deal, but now you're probably looking at a better talented player. Maybe he's had to deal with stuff in the past. So I would keep that on the table, too, is just trading for a player outright. Probably not with a first-round pick, though.
Yeah,
that's where I'm at with it, too, because, like, when I look at the crop of free agents, there's no one where I can, like, feel comfortable moving them into our like DB1 or CB1. Like, L'Jarius Sneed and Jalen Johnson probably the only guys, right? But, like, I really don't know how I feel about those guys long term. I mean, what do you make of this crop of this crap? I guess Jalen Johnson does play for the Bears. What do you make of this crop of free agent cornerbacks?
Yeah. No, I mean, I'm kind of with you there. Like I said, I struggle with seeing that the Lions are going to pay a ton of money to a cornerback in free agency. I mean, I guess they could. I don't think Jalen Johnson's getting out of Chicago. I think that would be crazy. L'Jarius Sneed, like, it would work. I mean, it would work. He's still a young player. I just don't see it happening. I think they fall more into that mid. I can't think of dudes. Adoree Jackson. He's a guy that I'm kind of keeping an eye on in a way.
That's
I think he could be interesting. I mean, he's a guy that probably wouldn't command tons of money, but I also know that he can play. But at the same time, it's like, if I put him out there as a starter, he could start. He could start on the outside with Cam Sutton, and it wouldn't be like, yo, there's our number one. But he could also offset, I think, the skill set in a lot of ways of Cam Sutton. But at the same time, he wouldn't break the bank, so I could still go draft someone on top of that. So that kind of piece, to me, intrigues me in this one for cornerback. I think that's kind of how it's lined up for me.
See, for me, and this is something I've brought up, Dion, a lot throughout the last week, is that go and look for it via trade, because I don't really see it in free agency. And where this team is positioned in the draft, I don't know if it's a cornerback that you believe in long term to be a one. I mean, we saw a guy as good as Jalen Ramsey go for just a third last year. So looking around the league, you know this better than I do, as far as there's a lot of teams that got to make a lot of cuts money wise, all of that. Who's a cornerback that you could see potentially being available via trade? And is there anyone that you would see that is smart for the Lions to go after?
Yeah, I mean, I'm still of the mind that a guy like J.C. Horn would be super interesting. I mean, I don't have any reason to believe that he'd be moved, but I just think when you look at him missing more time, playing I think 6 games this past year, and that side of the whole situation, and then you also keep in mind like how good he looks when he plays. Like the dude has all the talent. So as a first-round pick, he's got all the traits that I love. And as soon as you watch him, like, man, the Panthers just look like a whole different defense. That was a legit defense last year, as bad as they were. So someone like that, where it's like he's probably not going to get the 5th year, probably won't get paid. Maybe he could be an addition where kind of like the Mosley thing, where it's like, oh, he's coming off of an injury. If you brought him in and he didn't play the full season, be like, okay, that's kind of expected. We don't pay him. But it also wouldn't take like the highest draft pick I think you have. I don't know how many guys I would say that stand out to me that kind of also fall into that realm. I think the Jalen Ramsey one was super interesting, kind of because the whole contract situation there, like you said, what they gave up for him seemed crazy. But at the same time, it's like, at that time, I was like, yo, why did the Lions not do that? It was like, what are we doing? Why didn't we go get him? But also knowing how much Brad Holmes brings up the character, and he's like, yo, some players can't play for Detroit. Like, there's a lot of things that, you know, even from the outside looking in, it's like, man, I don't even know how they evaluate that. So there's so many guys that are probably just taken off the table directly that I don't even know of, right? So Jalen kind of falls in that category because it seemed like a steal to the point that you brought up. But, yeah, I'm definitely open to that option. I think it makes a ton of sense.
Speaking of the Dolphins, there's a lot of talk that Xavier Howard might be out there because they're like $51 million over the cap or something, and I think if they cut him pre-June 1st, they get to save $14.5 million. So that's something. I mean, if you can get Xavier Howard, you go fucking get Xavier Howard. You know, that'd be pretty nice.
Yeah. I mean, that would make sense, too, based on where Miami's at, because they drafted a corner this last year, I think in the 3rd round, I think it was, out of South Carolina, and the dude didn't really play at all. So just based on how that whole defensive coordinator situation went, Fangio left, and now it's like, okay, they just weren't playing the young guys, and it sounds like maybe some people were upset about that. That would make sense, that they would be like, okay, move the vet. Let's go with the young guys now. Let's do this. We have Rams. Let's go with the young guys.
That's a great point you made, too, about, I guess, cornerbacks that didn't get that 5th-year option picked up. From what draft class would that have been now? 5 years ago?
19.
19?
Is that 19?
Yeah, 19.
Would have been like guys drafted in 2019? Well, not 2020, because this would have been Hawk's 5th year.
Yeah.
We traded up 22. I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna see what DBs are taking round 1 and see if they're, you know, if they're not getting. That's a great point. Like, those would be the guys getting traded. That's why we traded Hawk, right? Like, we weren't picking up his 5th year. So I traded Okudah. We weren't picking up his 5th year.
And look what Okudah went for. I mean, it didn't take much to get him. It didn't take much at all to go get Jeff Okudah.
Yeah. Yeah, he's a free agent this year too, right?
Oh, he might be.
Atlanta?
Yeah, he probably is.
Is that something you're exploring or no?
Man, leave him be.
Probably not. You know, I like Jeff Okudah, man. Shout out to Okudah, but nah, I probably wouldn't mess with that.
What was your thought? Because beginning of the season, before Brad Holmes or not beginning of the season, but once the season was officially over, before Brad Holmes spoke to the media, I kind of mentioned, like, you know, if Ben comes back, like this, you have to go all in this next year because, like, I don't know when Ben's returning. I don't know what the team's gonna look like when Ben returns. What?
I was just saying, 2 guys that are going to be on their 5th-year option next year as cornerbacks are J.C. Horn and Patrick Surtain.
Yeah.
If you I'd give my left nut to get Patrick Surtain on this team. I'm not gonna lie, like that would be amazing.
Do you see this year as like one of the, I don't want to say last opportunity. I don't want to make it sound like depressing, anything like that. But like the Lions' best chance to go out there and win that Super Bowl. Do you think that may change Brad Holmes' approach, like you said, in making a trade, or do you expect him to kind of do things the way he's been doing it because it's been working?
Right. Yeah. I mean, the only way I see it changing is this way. I think we started to kind of see the way that the idea of how he was going to build his team, and it feels a little not fair to say this, but at the end of last year, when the practice squad additions were like veterans, they were no longer just the young guys, like we want to get a look, let them develop. It was like, all right, we're going to start moving off those. Let's get vets in here that can play right now so we can make this push. Because to what you just said is exactly why I thought this would be the year, like, yo, if it's going to happen, we're going to shock everybody to do it because Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn are still here. I thought for sure Ben was going to go. Yeah. I really thought Aaron Glenn would probably get a shot too, but yeah, the fact that they came back, so part of me, like, I'm not really I have no reason to be worried about like where this thing's going to go for the future because I think as long as you just continue to draft well, and you feel good at quarterback, like you're going to be a consistent team, and then you just got to get into the playoffs and give yourselves a shot. But yeah, I think you make a great point. With Ben Johnson back and Aaron Glenn back, like this, I don't think Brad Holmes will change his approach necessarily, you know, outside of maybe just like some of those free agent signings won't just be I don't even want to say that. Like, I think it makes sense that they could go add a veteran that could play right now at some of those premium positions, right? If that's an edge rusher, if that's someone that's just like ring chasing, that could be the major difference that we see, because I don't think we usually see that a ton in the offseason. Like maybe the closest thing was like CD Deuce, and it was like, okay, but it wasn't like he was ring chasing. He just didn't get a long-term deal. So maybe we get one of those mixed in. But outside of that, I don't think a lot of things change. I mean, I think he's going to continue to do what he does.
Yeah, that's a great point. Dion, man, I'm sorry for taking so much time from you. If you guys don't know who Dion is, he's one of the GOATs when it comes to Detroit Lions content.
Facts.
What other
Sir.
videos you got cooking up, coming out this week, and where can people follow you and check out your content?
Yeah, man. Hey, I appreciate it. First off, thanks for having me again, man. The show's always great. Hopefully, I don't look super dark. I'm looking at myself. I'm like, dang, I look like I'm kind of in a tunnel a little bit. Like I got the lights on. I don't know what I'm doing. Look, man, I've had this camera for like 2 years, and I have no idea what I'm doing with it. I'll say this: I'm hoping to get some sort of like mock draft out. I always like doing the mock off seasons, but my goal is to get a mock draft out this week. My first one, kind of like that pre-NFL Combine mock draft. So expect that at some point this week. But yeah, Dose for Dion 2.0, man. But no, I appreciate you guys having me, man. It was awesome to get back on here. This is one of those shows, I'll say this, that for some reason you still get a little nervous when you jump on it. Like, oh snap, I gotta be on it, man, because this is about to be fun. I get it as soon as I jump in. But no, I appreciate you guys having me, man. This was awesome.
Appreciate you always, Dion, man. It's
appreciate
always
you,
a pleasure.
man.
You never gotta be nervous with us, man. You know we always having a good time.